Hello and welcome back. This is the American Sedevacanist. Today we're going to talk about an objection against sedevacantism. Let's get to it. A strong objection against sedevacantism, which I would also include to be sedevacanism, material formal sedevacantism in this context, is the supposed universal peaceful acceptance of the Vatican II popes. The argument is that the Vatican II popes have been universally accepted, or rather, universally recognized as true popes. Therefore, one cannot question the validity of their pontificate, and to do so would to deny a dogmatic fact. This argument is wrong on multiple points, but only one point is needed to show that the entire objection falls as a house of cards. Here is a syllogism to demonstrate that this objection fails. Any man that has validly accepted the papacy, externally and internally, is the supreme pontiff of the church. But Francis has only externally accepted the papacy. Therefore, Francis is not the supreme pontiff of the church. It is a metaphysical certitude that Francis lacks the form of the papacy authority, which furthermore shows that he lacks the internal acceptance of the papacy because he intends to enforce a false religion on the universal church by continuing the doctrinal, liturgical, and disciplinary reforms of the Second Vatican Council. The reforms of Vatican II enforce previously condemned errors on the Catholic faithful. Therefore, this is an infallible sign that the reforms of Vatican II do not proceed from the Catholic Church. Otherwise, the Church will have defected, which is impossible given the indefectibility of the Catholic Church. Because of this infallible sign, the evil reforms of Vatican II, it is evident that Francis lacks the internal acceptance to the papacy. Therefore, there is no universal peaceful acceptance of Francis as the Roman pontiff. Because without the internal acceptance of the papacy, there cannot be universal peaceful acceptance, commonly abbreviated as UPA. To conclude, I will quote Father Duterte of the Roman Catholic Institute in order to explain UPA and how acceptance is required on the part of the Pope-elect for UPA to exist. Father Duterte: let us here repeat the words of the Salamantensians, showing that what they mean by a legitimate election clearly requires the proper consent of the elect. Quote, the election is perfectly achieved when the elect consents to the election by accepting the pontificate, because there is then a mutual consent which corroborates itself mutually, and a spiritual marriage is contracted between the church and the pope, between the members and the head, between the sheep and the pastor. End quote. There is thus a mutual consent which corroborates itself mutually between the pope-elect and the church. Hence, if there is universal acceptance on the part of Catholics, only a lack of acceptance on the part of the elect himself could explain a failure to produce this spiritual matrimony of which theologians are here speaking. The Dominican theologian Domenico Maria Marchesi, 1633 to 1692, emphasizes that UPA always presupposes the acceptance of the Pope-elect, to such a point that UPA could never produce a dogmatic fact without the acceptance of the elect. Quote, indeed, the acceptance of the Church, which renders the fact that the elect is the Pope a truth of faith, includes also the Pope himself. It would not indeed be a faith that this man is the Pope, and indeed he would not be the Pope, unless being elected he accepts himself as the Pope. End quote. Thus, it is evident that the UPA is directly dependent on the acceptance of the papacy by the elect himself. It cannot be a truth of faith that a given man is the Pope if this man does not accept to be the Pope in the first place. It is comforting to see that this principle had already been laid out by past theologians. And it is certainly interesting to note that this seems to be the only exception given by past theologians to the force of a morally universal acceptance of Catholics. Saint Dominic, pray for us. Saint Thomas Aquinas, pray for us. Our Lady, destroyer of heresies, pray for us.